Hello all, I'm Ann Thompson. I'd like to welcome to the stage, please, Michelle Williams. Casey Affleck. And writer-director Kenneth Lonergan. So it's been a while since you showed this to the world for the first time at Sundance. It's hard to believe. It was almost a year ago.
Yeah, it's just about a year.
So I want to ask each of you a question, which is so many movies that we do in this world turn out badly. They don't work out. What is it about this movie that went well, that went perfectly? Why did it come out so well?
It was beautifully cast.
I knew you were going to say that.
But I was in all the other ones that didn't work out well, too. So I think Michelle must be the difference.
No, I always say it's just as hard to make a good movie. It's just as hard to make a bad movie as it is a good movie. You care as much, you try as much, you think about it as much, but it doesn't all. It's actually all about the director.
Now, you came on board this project pretty early, and it was a relatively small role. Tell me why it was so important to you to hang in with this movie.
I'd wanted to work with Kenny for a decade, and so when this came my way, no matter, however big or small the role was, I wanted to do it. It was a dream come true, and so the sort of the size of the role or the consequence of the role wasn't really an issue to me. It was a role that Kenny had written, so it was never a worry for me.
So talk about how you worked with Kenny in a play, This Is Our Youth, and with Matt Damon, the producer, as well. Talk about how you used some theater work in terms of the rehearsal process in preparing for this.
Well, I think that one of the things that is a little bit more like theater than it is usually with films is that you just have a rehearsal period. And sometimes the first time you read the lines out loud or you meet the other actor is on set, and that's not the case with Kenny. And I think one of the reasons for that is that there's he probably likes working that way, yes, and he can speak to it, but also that there's a lot going on in the script, and not only that, but Kenny has sort of already thought of 100 different ways of playing it and doing it, and so the rehearsal period is really, really productive, and it sort of prepares you for what happens on the set. In a movie like this, you don't have a whole lot of time to do things, and we use the rehearsal time really well, mostly by sort of absorbing the different ways that Kenny had envisioned it, or ways he thought that the scene could play, sort of not precluding spontaneity and ideas happening on the set, but just setting us up so that if we're in a crunch or for whatever reason things aren't happening on that day, we've done a lot of preparation and we already have some depth to what we're bringing when we show up.
Why is the rehearsal important to you?
Well, I just think, you want to give the actors the best chance they can to do their best work, and I think they bring in so much on their own, and I guess I just want everyone oriented in the same direction so you don't have conflicting ideas about what's happened in the past in the circumstances, so everyone has a similar understanding about the circumstances, and I just keep thinking of the word orient, because you don't want to confine them, you don't want to dictate to them, you don't want to micromanage them, but for instance, that wonderful scene where they meet toward the end of the film with the baby carriage, it's very important to know some basic biographical things. When the last time they saw each other was. Well, we know it was at the funeral, but before that, have they spoken? Have they not spoken? What do they know about each other's lives? What do they know the other one knows about his or her life? And just having a common understanding that similar to what you would, identical to what you would have in real life. You know, it really changes the dynamic of the scene. So for me, it's all about the dynamic. And the most interesting thing in any movie is to see the two actors' behavior and involvement with each other, the dynamic of the people in the room, 2 or 10 people, it doesn't matter. It's just how people affect each other. You know, one thing that I love about this cast, and particularly Casey and Michelle, is that they're not just wonderful actors, but they're wonderfully generous actors. They're not here. Casey is not on stage green to do the Casey Affleck show and have everyone kind of circle around him as if they're satellites to his star. And Michelle's the same way. They really throw themselves into the arms of their of their scene partners, and Lucas too. Everybody in the story does. So it's really wonderful to work with generous actors, because you just see them. They give each other so much that the scene kind of erupts almost as if it's on its own, but it's not. But it seems that way.
Also, just on the same one thing, on the rehearsal, question of rehearsal, I think it wasn't just with the actors, but it seems like there are 2 basic categories of directors that I've worked with. I'm sure there are other people who do things other ways, but there are people who kind of just assemble the different, hire people and then let them do their job. And then there are those who are really trying to sort of bring the best out of, not only bring the best out of each of those people, cast and crew, but also sort of bring the right version of what they ought to be doing so that it all works really well together, so that the production design seems like it matches the cinematography, seems like it matches the kind of styles of acting and the wardrobe and all of that. And that is really, really hard job. It's when I think about, if I were to ever try directing, it seems like the most daunting, because you're working with people who are all really good at what they do, and then you have to also sort of not only just elevate them, but put them in the right movie, in the same movie, so they're all working in the same movie. And I've been on a lot of movies where that doesn't happen, and people are just sort of doing their thing on their own. And Kenny would take the time, not just with I guess the point is that I would see it happen with the actors, where he's sort of, through the rehearsal process, putting us all into the same world, but also I would see it happening with the crew and all the preparation time. It's very, very useful, very helpful remarks and direction and guidance coming from Kenny. And so when you see that happening with other people, sometimes you think, oh, he's giving them really good direction. I had better listen to him when he gives me direction.
So as long as you brought up that scene, I was going to come to that eventually anyway. I don't know about the rest of you, but that scene destroys me every time I see it. And I've been happy enough to sit through the movie twice, and it is an unusual scene. There isn't that much dialogue, really. There's a lot going on in your faces, really, and your body language. Michelle, could you talk a little bit about how you prepared for that scene? And you also sort of stalled on doing it. You waited until the end of, the whole, you kept putting it back, right?
That was kind of a happy accident. It was scheduled for the middle of the shoot, and then we had to push back one time, and then we chose to push back another time because we hadn't given the scene enough hours in the day to feel comfortable shooting it. So it ended up getting moved to almost the last week of shooting, and I think that was it worked out well for us, just because of we all really wanted it to go well. We knew it was an important scene, and I had no idea how much they were going to bring to it and how beautifully they were going to embody those people in that street.
Michelle?
I started thinking about that scene as soon as I read the script. I started thinking, and that's maybe 4, 5, 6 months out of shooting. I immediately started. I find that when you know that you're going to do something, it just becomes this sort of like resting place. Like so much of your adult life is quiet, silent, waiting. You're in the car, or you're like in the grocery line or something, and that was just that scene was the place that my mind would just sort of land, because to me, I think it was the most beautiful scene that I'd had the opportunity to do on film thus far, and it felt like a lot of responsibility, and I was nervous about it. And it was Kenny, like I said, a decade I'd held out like this, like maybe one day, and so then here it was. And so to me, the area was really important. When you have a movie that's called Manchester by the Sea, and you live in New York, and you're 4 hours from Manchester by the Sea, like it's important to go delve into Manchester by the Sea. What is it about this place that makes it unique? Because those specificities I find can be so, the more specific you make something, the more universal you can make something, because then it feels really, really true. So I spent an inordinate amount of time in the place, talking to people, watching people, observing people. I was saying to somebody that the male-female dynamics there had a really interesting quality that I hadn't really seen before. I would go to these dive bars, and there would be just as many, like real dive bars, like places that make jokes about sexual assault, like that kind of a like deeply divey bar. And there would be just as many girls sitting there having a beer with their girlfriends as there would be guys sitting there having a beer with their guy friends. So there was like this real kind of like interplay, like among the sexes, this kind of like roughness and playfulness and combativeness, and so that became a part of our relationship, I hope, on screen. And what I was wearing, how I did my hair, how many piercings I had in my ear, it was all informed by just watching people and talking to people and seeing what seemed like authentic to the area. And then the scene itself, Kenny's right, it did wind up kind of like taking on, because there was all of this sort of lead up, it wound up kind of mimicking the space that maybe Randi and Lee would have found themselves in. Like, eventually we're going to run into each other. What's going to happen? What would we say? How would it go? And that's kind of what these sort of false starts created. Like, oh, that almost happened, but it didn't happen. How is it going to go? So there wound up being a dynamic in real life that I think actually was sort of helpful for the dynamic we were trying to create on screen.
So what is it that the two of them are doing to each other in that scene? I mean, there's this odd gentleness and concern, and you feel really strong emotions between them. But what is the real dynamic in that scene between the two characters? How would you describe it?
Well, that scene is another example of how Kenny has really great direction for actors, because one of the things that he said was, now I'll probably get it wrong, and I'll be upset about it, but he said to me that I couldn't bear the interaction was very, very painful. It was almost unbearable, and I didn't want to be forgiven. I didn't want her to be forgiven in some sense. I also didn't want to hurt her feelings, because that would be even worse. But I wanted to let her know that I was just not ready. I couldn't go have lunch with her. I couldn't stand there and speak to her. But I also didn't want to be rude or be hurtful or do anything to make the situation worse. And so there's a lot of residual love and affection, and obviously, I feel in some ways like what she's trying to, say she's sorry about, in some ways sort of forgive me and tell me she hopes that I'm can live a fuller life and all that stuff. That too is too difficult to hear, and so I'm in this bind where I have to get out of the situation, but I also, the last thing I want to do is walk away and make her feel worse.
What kinds of things did you say to them to help them?
Well, I said that basically, but much better.
And how many times did you do the scene? How many times did you run through it?
Well, not that many. We had 2 cameras, which is always good for a serious dialogue scene, and I think we did about 4 or 5 takes over each of their shoulders, which gave us 10 takes in the 2-shot, which was always going. But no, I think what's so beautiful about the performances there is that she's desperate to help him and pull him somewhat out of the hole he's in, and he's desperate to get away from her, and they're both desperate not to hurt each other doing what they're trying to do, and it makes this bumping into each other so painful, and so it's very beautiful how much they care about each other in the scene, even though they're at such odds, and you see the immensity of what they've lost, and they're both so aware of it, and how it was nice to write it, but how they played it, I have no idea. I mean, it's really quite an accomplishment, in my opinion. I mean, it's just gorgeous, and so...
I'll just add one. I like to add things
Sure.
after the topic is exhausted.
Sure.
I like this. Just tying that into the rehearsal, that was probably one of the only scene that we didn't fully rehearse in a way, that do it and do it over again and talk about it a lot and then do it again, and which and also, so that makes it a little bit trickier sometimes. And it's also very, very hard to come, for me at least, and other people, actors I know, to sort of come into something, do a scene, and then not go to work for a week or so, and then come back and do another scene. In some ways, it's easier, no matter how long the days are or how difficult the scenes are, to start it and stay in it. But if you have to, go to work one day a week or something, it's hard. And then on top of it, it's a very hard scene. And then it's a scene that we didn't actually kind of go through and rehearse a whole lot. And so it's pretty, I was dumbfounded at how well Michelle could just step into it and do that so completely. It was really amazing to watch.
I'll add to something. And not only that, but she did that for every single scene she had to do, because Casey was there the whole time, so he pretty much walked through it. But Michelle has to come in and then be in the bedroom, and then this nice, happy, rough and tumble marriage with the 3 kids and this
runny nose,
pretty runny nose in the cold, and a pretty.
I would have licked the subway poles to get an actual cold though for Kenny Lonergan. I really was like, how am I would do anything to get a cold right now?
But she comes in and does that, then she goes away, and then she comes in and does, and in the middle of the night and takes her coat off and is in her pajamas and does the fire scene, which is the most agonizing thing I've ever seen in anything I've ever done. I have a hard time watching those few seconds in the film, mostly because of the incredibly realistic distress that she's in, and just I don't know how she did that either. And then she goes away and comes back and yells at all those 20 big burly guys for playing ping pong and just blasts them into non-existence with two good blasts, and then comes back and is in that beautiful funeral scene where there's no dialogue and she's just it's all these looks and approaching Casey and just that one moment when you brush the hair aside and then walk over to him with your new husband, and then goes away and comes back and does the scene on the hill. I mean, it's just really something, and this is not to take anything away from Casey, who's obviously
I walked through it, it's fine.
But it's really, it was really a tremendous gift for me.
Now let me chime in. I have something I'd like to add to everything you guys added. It's so hard to find a good part. It is so hard. Before this, I hadn't made a movie for a year and a half. And then I did another movie called Certain Women with Kelly Reichardt, and it had been another year and a half after that since I made another movie. It is so hard to get good work and to find a good part. And when you do find a great part and great writing, the task is not... it's not difficult. It's not like it's not arduous. It's hard to like live up to being as good as the part is, but it's not like how am I going to make this thing work? It's how am I going to be good enough to fit this thing. So thanks for writing a great part because they're so rare.
Thank you.
We have here 3 winners of the New York Film Critics Circle. You had a good week, and the movie won the National Board of Review and Screenplay. It's all good, all good. So, speaking of the screenplay, you guys are not improvising on this movie. This is written. This is about delivering his words. Is that easier or harder? Tell me, how difficult is it to deliver on Lonergan's script?
On Lonergan's script, where shall I begin? I think that in general, I'll give a longer answer than maybe you want. There's sometimes you read a script and it feels like it's just a kind of blueprint for something that's supposed to happen. And there isn't a whole lot there other than an idea of it. And sometimes you ask the director or the writer and you say, well, why are they doing this, or why are they doing that, or why are they saying this, or why are they saying that? And sometimes you get a shrug, and, well, you want to say something else? What would you say? And it's because there isn't a great reason behind it all. It's sort of things are done often in a kind of slapdash way, or they're just not done they're done carefully, but not with the sort of level of talent and hard work that Kenny puts into it. And so you have to sometimes improvise, or you semi-improvise and you make things up the night before, or you're rewriting on the set, or you're trying to make it all make sense. And that's not a great way to work, but it is a way, it's sometimes easier than doing a scene that is constructed in a way that just topples over, like Jenga or something. You pull it out and it stops working. And so that is a sort of remedy, a sort of quick fix to scenes sometimes. But, you know, with Kenny's, we did a play together a long time ago, and I learned pretty quickly that sometimes I had an idea, well, what if he says this or what if he says that? And Kenny would say, why? Why would he do that or why not? And you'd get into a conversation about it, and almost 100% of the time you would end up saying the words that he had written down there, because there's a very, very good reason for why he chose even the smallest little words. They worked the best, and they brought the thing to life, and it's mysterious sometimes how and why like good dialogue works. But when it works really, really well, you'd better sort of try to find your way to it instead of dragging it to whatever is easiest for you. So there was no improvisation in the movie. It was just perfectly written,
So my other question is how much
Everybody heard that, though, right?
humor, how much of the humor that's in this movie is in the script, and how much of it was brought by you guys? There's a lot
all
of
the humor hours. That's the script. When I said perfect script, I mean not a joke in there to be found. Otherwise, perfect.
A lot of both. Like the rest of the film, the script has actually one of the reasons why there's so much humor in the script is because I showed the script to Casey early on, and he said he really liked it, but he felt as if I was sitting on his chest and I wouldn't get off. I thought, and as a result of that, which confirmed my own worry about that draft, and as a result, I added a lot more of the material that has to do with Patrick and his life, and some of the funnier moments came in, not so much just to provide comic relief in the traditional way, but as to add to the story the part of life that I had left out and made a somewhat falsely grim pass at the material. I don't, you know, I think that the humor and the drama are pretty well intertwined and in life, and also so that's what I try to do in the writing and the directing of the movie. But you know, they all have really good senses of humor, and as you can see just watching the film, and it really kind of, I think, fills in the story rather than dilutes it.
Now, there's a scene with a frozen chicken that I think you and Lucas Hedges did very well with Casey. Talk about how you worked that out.
Well, Lucas had the heavy lifting to do in that scene. How has it worked out? It was, you know, he's such a talented guy and a real professional that he came to work every day, even though his mom was there. He was very prepared, and he was really a peer. He was not a minor at all. He was doing he had a hard job to do, and he was going to give it his all. And so he showed up that day, and he had clearly been thinking about it for weeks, and probably, but definitely all that morning. He was in a very focused space, and he played the scene, which is kind of a hard scene to do, very hard scene to do. And I thought he just did a great job, and I was sort of there to react to him, and that's what I tried to do. And it's one of those scenes. Sometimes you think, what happened there? Did the scene happen? Did we do it? Because it all happened sort of messily and suddenly, and that's just the pace of the tone of the scene. Chicken's falling out of the fridge, and he's panicking and hunched over, and so. I wasn't really sure what had happened, but when I saw the movie, I was able to see more clearly how nuanced that moment was, and how great it was, and how emotional it was.
Also, I want to say about Lucas, like he's got this incredible veneer of toughness and this can-do attitude, and he's very positive, his character, and he's kind of a scrappy kid with the hockey and the girlfriends and the band, all of which is a character work on Lucas's part. In real life, he's a sensitive, artsy kid from St. Anne's in New York City. He grew up in a theater family, and he has this immense sensitivity and emotional vulnerability, but the rest of it is a really beautifully constructed character from a very young actor. That scene was immensely important because the character is basically trying to tough it out most of the time, which is I think, natural for a kid who's been through as much as he's been through, and who's also been taken care of as well as he's been taken care of by his dad, whom Kyle Chandler plays. So when he does fall apart, it had to be a pretty complete collapse, and I was so pleased when the scene went as well as it did. Partly also not to just keep swapping compliments, but Casey insisted that we were going to wrap after we did a few takes that were very good. And Casey said to me, "He's doing so well. No, let's do some more. He's doing really well." And so we shot for another hour at Casey's instigation, and then we got all these amazing takes that you see and that we used in the movie, where he's just, those sobs that come out of him just break my heart. And I love also, there's this line that usually gets a laugh when he says, "If you're going to freak out every time you see a frozen chicken, I think I should take you to the hospital." And right before that, he says, "Are you having a," and he says, "I just don't like him being in the freezer." And it's just such an open wound, and it's just so sweet the way he says that, and you just, it just makes your heart go out to him, at least mine anyway. And it's so nice to work with someone who's, he doesn't always have the tools right away that a more experienced actor would have, but he's so game, and you just see him kind of looking around for where's the scene, and then he finds it, and it just goes like, whoop. It's really exciting to work with.
All right, I have some questions from the room here. I have little cards, and I'm going to, this is from Maria Carlix. How does location contribute to character development and execution, and how did it inspire you?
Well, I can answer that for me anyway, but I think learning about the specifics of the location, for instance, the hospital's in Beverly, the school is in Manchester, and the hockey rink is in Gloucester. Each are about 20 minutes away from each other. And so doing the research to find that out in a very unexpected way gives me something to put in place for Lee's character, which then gives Casey something to play, because he's got to plan out what he's doing. And it tells me that the guy is, and when I'm pretending to be Lee, and I'm figuring out how much time I have at the hospital before I have to get in the car, and then I realize later that the reason I want to do that is, as Lee, is because I want to be the one to tell him. I don't want him to find out from anyone else. And he tells the assistant principal, he doesn't tell the assistant principal that the father's dead, because he doesn't want there to be any chance that he won't be the one to deliver this terrible news. This from someone who is unable to connect with anyone. He still has that strong a sense of duty and responsibility and enough care for the kid to want to take care of this. He's trying to take care of this these very terrible arrangements very mechanically, but it's invested with this real humanity. So those kind of little details give me a tremendous amount. And I know they give Casey a tremendous amount, because Casey's performance is so, the combination of the attempt to be methodical and the immense pain and distress that's holding in check is something I've never really seen before. But a lot of it comes from, the location just helps. And then they get on the boat and everyone relaxes, and it's just so beautiful out there, and the wind is blowing and the islands are going past, and we all just, it gives you everything in a way. I don't know what you guys think about
Michelle?
that.
I mean, I think I touched on it earlier, and it was it was crucial to me, and also you just rarely have that kind of access to a location. As an actor, you're sort of pretending that you know what it was like to, I don't know, live in Victorian times, or to be from Texas, but you don't have the kind of like the place sitting there. You're not making like a modern day piece about a place. So, as I said earlier, it also became a kind of way, I don't know, there's a lot of like anticipation when you're working on something, and it's sort of a way to, researching things or thinking about things or going places is also just like a way to like soothe your nerves, to feel like, okay, I'm doing something, I'm present here, I'm looking around, I'm taking all of this in. And it did, I mean, I would talk to people on the streets, I would have coffee with people, just if I could glean. I once, when I was doing this play, I went to Berlin to go to some of these places that my character had been, and I felt like if I get one thing, just one thing, it's all worth it to me. There is no such thing as like wasted time or when you're kind of on the trail for something. So the place to me was like a great, it was just great to have so much access to it.
Because you guys were both playing, in a way, pre-tragedy, post-tragedy. Those are different characters. So there's a lighter quality to Lee before he goes into the shutdown mode. So it must have been fun to play those scenes and not have to be in super grim mode when you were playing them.
Yeah, that was a nice break from. Yeah, it was. Yeah. I mean, sometimes it required its own, sometimes, you look forward to those scenes and then you get there and it's supposed to be that great fun, everyone's playing ping pong and hanging out and everyone's in a terrible mood. And you think man, just couldn't I get, it's late at night and everyone wants to go home and maybe they won't shoot the scene and all the extras, the other actors have been there for 15 hours waiting to do it, and you try to turn on music and get people in a good mood, or you order some pizza, and people are just bummed out and exhausted, and so even that doesn't get to be exactly like a fun. You're the only guy laughing and faking the old ping pong.
Yeah, we had a big
mirth.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that.
No,
it was
really
like that.
nice.
Are you really? Are you? Are you sorry?
Well, not really, but we had a really sweet actor who was playing the guy that Casey's playing ping pong with, but he could not. Casey's a decent ping pong player, and this guy just could not hit the ball back. And they were practicing, and by the time I got there, Casey was like, "Can we get someone who can hit me the fucking ball back?" I've been trying to, cannot get too.
I don't talk that way.
No, he didn't.
I don't talk that way.
I'm embellishing the story, of course, but I didn't want to, but it actually worked out well. We did. There is a little improvisation in the movie, I should say. Anytime there's a whole bunch of people talking at once, more than two, there's usually some extra lines thrown in there. But I will say this other thing happened I don't think I've ever told you this story, but that was the last shot of a very long night, that ping pong scene, or the last scene, and I don't remember what we'd done before, but it was a pretty, we were into our 12th or 13th hour, and I was getting a little cranky, way out of character, but I was getting a little cranky. And we went from the house we were in to the ping pong location, which was in another building. And Casey had been there trying to rouse everybody and get them into a good, jolly party mood. And I get really touchy when people put on music that I don't like, just in a car or a taxi or anything, because I have certain problems. And so Casey had been really working to get everyone cheered up, just like he described, because everyone was tired and cranky, and he had this music on. And I walked into the basement, and there was this loud rock music playing, and I was trying to think of how to put that. And I was like, "Who put on that fucking music?" And I turned the music off, and it was like, "Oh, what do we do? We're sorry." and there's not a big laugh at the end of the story. That's the whole story. But I've heard actors say it's harder they'd much rather have to cry in a scene than laugh in one. So I think, but I do think we had some fun with the lighter. That scene in the bedroom was one of the most enjoyable scenes to shoot, I think, as I recall, anyway, with the two of you guys. Was it not?
You're jumping all over Michelle, and she doesn't want to have anything to do with you.
Undressing in
Super
front of
fun.
Michelle
Didn't we?
is not
I'm sorry. Maybe I thought it was fun. Maybe.
No, I thought it was a lot
Maybe
of fun.
none of
We had a
it
good time.
was fun for you.
I don't know. I tried to have fun. I turned on some music.
I know. I'm really sorry about that.
That's all right.
It worked out all right.
Yeah.
Once Michelle started yelling at you guys, we were all oriented. We were
that's
back
true.
in the movie again.
So here's a question from Skylar. This is for you actors. What can a director do to make you comfortable enough to do your best work?
Well, one thing is to sort of make you feel like your ideas are included, that you're a participant, not just a performer that is either going to get the thumbs up or thumbs down at the end of the take. For me, I guess one thing is to kind of have a relationship that is for the director to feel like you are, for it to feel okay to have a complicated relationship with your director, where they understand that you are either turning on music to be in a good mood, or you're being extremely short-tempered with them because you're trying to find a genuine, authentic short temper for the scene and stuff like that. And also, and then I'll let Michelle give a better answer, that at the end of trying something in a scene or doing it a certain way, if you feel like they've watched it and they've seen it, and then they come up to you and start the conversation that way, okay, I see what was happening there. I know it, not just pushing you constantly closer to some other thing that they want you to do. But if you feel kind of seen, it doesn't matter if you've done it well or not done it well, because I usually try to work, be very careful if I can afford it. Be very careful about the projects that I pick to be a part of, so that then you can be totally reckless when you're doing the movie, knowing that you're in good hands and you can make 100 mistakes, and that the person who's going to sort of put it all together knows kind of good from bad, or at least agrees with you in terms of what's good and bad.
Michelle?
Yeah, so true. I live in Brooklyn, and Mike Shannon, the actor, is my next door neighbor, and he was like, "You want to know the secret to making a good movie?" And I was like, "Yeah, I do." He was like, "So fucking simple. Work with a good director." Like, why doesn't anybody get that? They think it's so complicated. It's just you work with a good director. It's really funny because we share a wall. Like, our apartment is like, we can hear him in the morning, and he's a really loud yawner. His bedroom is next to my kid's bedroom, and you hear, whoa! It's just funny. She's like, I guess Mike's up. Anyway. Directors. But he was right. He was right. I was like, you're absolutely right. And I think I've noticed over the years that I work best when it feels like a family, which is why I think like independent film is just like the place for me, because they're like small families and you feel really safe to fail, because you feel safe. You just feel safe, like you said, like the word that you use, reckless, because everybody knows each other and there's like a lot of closeness, and like you see everything happen. Like in a small family, like me and Mike Shannon, you hear people yawn in the morning. Like you see everybody's. There's so much intimacy that you can't really hide aspects of your personality from people, or your needs from people, or your human behavior from people, because you're all in such a close space. And I found that for me, that makes me feel like the most comfortable, and I think that it sort of allows for my best work. But also, like Casey was saying, like when you feel like a director is like really inside something with you, and to the point where Kenny, I didn't ever feel like he was watching. I actually felt like Kenny was experiencing it with us, and so he was only coming out to say like that was true to me or that was not true to me. Like there wasn't judgment about it was good or bad. It was just like it was true or it wasn't true. But he was like, each time it felt like he was like jumping into the well with you, and so that makes it like much safer to do things because you're not going there alone.
Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.